It was one of those New York evenings where the city seemed to exhale. Cassie Miller stepped out of the Liberty Diner, letting the glass door swing shut behind her. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed faintly, clinging to the scent of burnt coffee and over-fried onion rings. Her shift was done, and her feet ached like always, but that wasn't what made her pause outside. The sky over Brooklyn was painted in fading gold and smoky lavender, the kind of dusk that could trick you into thinking life was quieter than it really was. Cassie pulled up the hood of her jacket, hugged herself against the wind, and took her usual route past the bridge. Routine. Safe. Something familiar in a world that often wasn't. But someone, broke the pattern tonight. She caught the silhouette in the distance. A man standing too still at the edge of the Brooklyn Bridge. Not leaning, not moving. Just there, as if frozen by something stronger than fear. Cassie stopped walking. Her breath hitched. It didn't feel right. She squinted through the evening haze. He was tall, wearing a sleek, dark overcoat that the wind tugged at relentlessly. And he wasn't just near the railing, he was on it. Her body moved before her brain caught up. She dropped her bag, broke into a sprint, boots pounding against the pavement as she raced through the thinning pedestrian traffic. "Hey!" she called out. "Hey, stop!" No reaction. Closer now, she saw his fingers clutching the metal bar, his shoes too close to the edge. The river far below churned with cold, uncaring indifference. She reached him. He finally turned. Cassie froze. She knew that face. Ethan Walker. Even in fading light, the name clicked. Billionaire. Tech genius. Grieving father. His daughter had died in a car crash last year. His wife left not long after. Then he vanished from the headlines, until now. He looked at her like she was interrupting a moment he'd planned too carefully. "You should go," he said. His voice was quiet. Hollow. Cassie shook her head, still breathless. "Not without you." A humorless smile touched his lips. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," she said softly. The air between them was sharp and thin. Cars below honked like distant ghosts. He looked down again, toward the water. "You think this helps?" he asked. "No," she said. "But standing here alone, that doesn't help either." He stared at her for a long moment. Her eyes didn't flinch. She didn't beg, didn't preach. She simply stood there, human and trembling, with too much pain in her eyes to be lying. Finally, something inside him gave way. He stepped down, not toward death, but toward her. And in the dying light of the city, two broken strangers shared the silence of survival. The sky cracked open not long after he stepped down. Rain started soft, like a whisper, then thickened into a cold, persistent drizzle that soaked through Cassie's sleeves and plastered Ethan's hair to his forehead. But neither of them moved. They just stood there, breathing. Two people suspended in a moment that shouldn't have existed. Ethan broke the silence first. "You shouldn't have stopped me." His voice was flat, almost polite, like a man giving directions. Cassie met his eyes, searching for something, anger, shame, anything. But there was only emptiness. "You're probably right," she said quietly. "But I did." He glanced away. "Why?" Cassie hesitated, then stepped closer. "Because I know what it's like to stand where you did." He frowned slightly. "You?" She gave a small nod. "My husband was killed in a car accident 2 years ago. Head-on collision. I was waiting for him at the diner. He was late. I thought maybe he stopped for gas. I didn't know until the hospital called." Ethan's jaw tightened. Rain dripped from his chin. "I stopped going places. I stopped talking. I stopped eating for a while. Just breathing felt like betrayal." He shifted, as if her words physically weighed on him. "So, what changed?" he asked. Cassie gave a bitter smile. One day, I was sitting on a bench crying, couldn't stop. An old woman sat next to me, didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice. She just reached out and held my hand. Ethan studied her. And that fixed you? Cassie shook her head. Number. But it reminded me I still existed. He let out a laugh, sharp, broken. I don't want sympathy. Good, she said. I'm not offering any. Just coffee. That made him pause. What? There's a diner a few blocks away, she said, motioning back down the bridge. Warm, quiet, zero judgment. You can sit in a booth and stare at your cup for an hour if you want. I won't ask anything else. He looked at her, unsure whether she was serious, but her eyes didn't flinch. You don't even know who I am. You're someone who didn't jump tonight, she said. Ethan stared at the wet concrete. His shoulders slowly dropped, and then, with a tired sigh, he followed. They walked together in silence, footsteps echoing against slick pavement. The rain didn't stop. It poured harder, soaking their clothes, their hair, their grief. Inside the diner, the world felt far away. Cassie gestured to a corner booth and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. She slid into the seat across from him and handed over a napkin. Ethan didn't speak. He stared at the steam rising from his mug like it might hold an answer. I used to think about driving into a river, he said suddenly. Cassie didn't flinch. He went on. But I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to keep living like this. She nodded slowly. That's exactly how it feels. A long pause passed between them. Then, softly, he asked, Why do you care? She held his gaze. Because someone once cared enough to stop me. Ethan blinked, and for a moment, he looked completely undone. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Sometimes, survival begins with sitting in silence beside someone who sees you, even if just for a night. The diner felt like a time capsule. The rain tapped against the windows in steady rhythm as the clock behind the counter ticked past midnight. Cassie sat across from Ethan in the booth farthest from the door. Their coffee cups steamed between them, half full and untouched. Neither of them said anything for a while, and that was okay. There's a kind of silence that's suffocating. This wasn't that. This was the silence of breath after drowning, of 2 people who understood grief in ways the world often rushed past. Ethan finally spoke. I haven't said her name out loud in over 6 months. Cassie blinked slowly, giving him space. Sophia, he said. She was 11. Funny. Brilliant. Always drawing things upside down, just to challenge herself. Cassie leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. She was coming home from school with my wife. Drunk driver ran a red light. Hit them head on. His voice cracked on the last word. Cassie said nothing. She'd learned that sometimes silence is the best kind of listening. They kept calling it a tragedy, Ethan continued, as if using a bigger word made it make sense. But tragedy implies it was a story. This wasn't. It was just a fracture. His fingers wrapped around the coffee mug like it might anchor him. I bought the building across from the bridge, he said quietly. I thought if I stared at it long enough, maybe I'd stop being afraid. Maybe the decision would come easy. Cassie swallowed. But it didn't. No, he said. It felt like if I disappeared, at least the pain would go quiet. She stared at him, her own voice soft. I get it. Every day after my husband died felt like a ghost town inside my chest. I kept waiting for the part where I'd feel better. But that never came. Ethan looked up. So how did you survive? She shrugged. I stopped trying to survive. I just started showing up, for work, for coffee, for whatever tiny thing didn't ask too much of me. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. They sat like that, quietly processing, until Cassie stood and went behind the counter. She returned with pie, Apple for him, cherry for her. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Is this the therapy part? It's the sugar part, she said. Cheaper and quicker. He chuckled. Just once. But it was the first real sound of life in his voice since they met. When the plates were empty and the sky outside shifted from pitch black to deep navy, Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a small, matte black business card. He slid it across the table. For emergencies. Or not. Cassie took it, thumb running across the raised letters. No title, just a name and number. Thanks, she said. He stood slowly, looking less like a man leaving and more like someone who might come back. No promises, he said. You don't owe me any, she replied. And with that, Ethan turned and walked out into the sleeping city. Cassie stayed behind, staring at the spot where he'd been sitting, the card warm in her hand. Some people arrive like storms, others like a question you didn't know you were waiting to ask. He was both. They never said it aloud, but a rhythm formed. Most nights, near closing time, Ethan would appear at the diner's door. He'd nod at Cassie, take his place at the corner booth, and sit quietly while she poured him coffee without asking. Sometimes they'd talk, other times they didn't have to. The silence between them had grown familiar, even gentle, like background noise in a home you forgot was yours. Each visit chipped away at the stone that had taken up residence in Ethan's chest. He laughed, rarely, but honestly. He listened more. Once, he asked Cassie for her favorite book. Another time, he brought her a dog-eared copy of his daughter's favorite sketchbook. They didn't call it friendship. They didn't need to. And then, one night, he didn't show. Cassie noticed immediately. She told herself not to worry. People get busy. Life shifts. But when he missed the next night, and then the third, her stomach began to knot. On the fourth evening, with the sky bruised purple and rain threatening again, she grabbed her coat and left without saying a word to the cook. She didn't have to guess where he might be. The bridge loomed ahead, shadowed and slick, its iron bones stretching into the night. And there he was. Same place, same coat, same haunted stillness. Ethan, she called, voice cutting through the wind. He didn't move. She stepped closer, breath shallow. Please don't do this. He turned. His face looked hollowed out, the weight of old grief freshly dug. I tried, he said. I really tried, Cassie. Her heart thundered in her chest. I know, she said softly. I saw you try. His eyes glistened. But it still hurts. It still wakes me up. Some nights I can still hear her laughing. And then I remember she's gone. Cassie swallowed the lump in her throat. I think about Jason every morning. I reach for him in bed and hate myself for forgetting he's not there. But pain doesn't mean you failed. It means you loved deeply. He shook his head. What's the point of living like this? She stepped forward, not breaking eye contact. Because even pain means you're still here. You're still capable of feeling. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not soon, but someday, you'll feel something else too. He looked at her, eyes full of storm. What if I never do? Then let me show you how to live again, she said, extending her hand. The wind howled between them, tugging at her jacket, threatening to pull everything apart. But Ethan didn't move, not for a second, not for a breath. And then he stepped back, away from the edge, toward her. He took her hand. Cassie pulled him in without hesitation, arms around his soaked shoulders as he collapsed against her. He shook, not from the cold, but from everything he'd been holding in. She didn't speak, just held on. They sank down together, right there on the wet pavement, hearts pounding and soaked in rain. She didn't care who saw, didn't care what it looked like. She just knew one thing: he didn't jump. And tonight, that was enough. 1 year later, the diner looked almost the same. Same flickering neon sign, same chipped counter. But everything around it had changed. A block away, where a rusted garage once sat crumbling, now stood a bright, glass-fronted building with a blue banner stretched across the entrance. Second Light, a place to begin again. Inside, rows of folding chairs filled the main room, candles lined the windowsills, strings of soft white lights curved across the ceiling. People laughed, hugged, cried. Every seat was full for the one-year anniversary of the center's opening. Cassie stood behind the snack table, adjusting a tray of cookies for the third time, trying not to cry from nerves. She glanced toward the front of the room, where Ethan stood behind a small wooden podium, one hand resting against it like an anchor. He looked different now, not untouched by grief, but no longer drowning in it. His hair was still neatly trimmed, his suit still dark and simple, but there was color in his face again, and purpose in his eyes. He cleared his throat. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight," he said softly. "Not just here in this building, but alive." The room fell silent. "Last year I stood on a bridge and decided it was over. I had lost my daughter, my marriage, my will to keep going. I thought the only thing left to do was let go." He paused, letting the silence hold his words. And then a waitress with tired eyes and too much grief of her own came running. She didn't lecture me. She didn't beg. She just stood there and reminded me what it means to be seen. Cassie looked down, heart swelling. I came back the next night. And the next. I didn't always talk. Sometimes I just sat in silence while she cleaned coffee cups. But every time she showed up, it told me one thing. I still mattered. A few people in the room quietly wiped tears. "So, we started this place together," he said. "For people who have stood at the edge, of grief, of trauma, of giving up. This isn't a fix. It's a beginning. A hand on your shoulder. A place to remember what hope feels like." The applause started slow, then rose like a wave. Ethan stepped down from the podium, giving Cassie a smile as he walked past. She joined him at the back door, where the city hummed gently outside. They walked side by side toward the bridge. Familiar, sacred, not a place of endings anymore, but of memory. Ethan carried a bouquet of white lilies,